Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we plug other podcasts that we've been on in a special mini episode.
Oh, hey Phil, sorry I was late. I was recording over there, and then I had to run over here and record, and then I had to go over there and record because I was just like a podcast
Slut?
I'm a little loose with my podcasting, that's for sure.
Polyamorous podcasting.
Polyamorous podcast. We saw you from across the bar, and we want to know if you want to record a podcast with us.
Yeah, so basically we're here for a bonus slice of shameless, not self-promotion, but actually looking out for our other podcast community, people that have been kind enough to invite us on their shows.
So today is Wednesday, June 26th, when you hear this. Friday of this week, June 28th. What podcast are we on, Phil?
We're on a podcast called Cows in the Field, which I feel I should say in a German accent. In line of the
Cows in the field.
Yeah, exactly. Can you explain the Werner Herzog quote behind it?
Well, you're putting me on the spot, but I can certainly try.
What the show is, because you go way back with these guys.
Justin and Laura Koo are wonderful, smart people who live in Massachusetts, my home state. Justin is a philosophy professor, and I came to them because Bilge Ebiri, friend of our show, talked about them in an article for Vulture about great film podcasts, where he happened to actually also talk about a show I produce. And I reached out to Justin, and I was like, "Hey, Justin, I love the show. Let's podcast together." And we've kind of been in touch ever since. And Cows in the Field is a show about the philosophy of movies, the philosophical ideas behind movies, popular movies. They cover really, really popular movies. And the quote plays from Werner Herzog about Cows in the Field plays at the beginning of every episode, which essentially is that we have to express ourselves. Otherwise, we're just cows in the field.
So we have to articulate ourselves.
Ooh, listen to that.
Just cows in the field.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm putting a little bit of Gruber in there.
In the dark. Yeah, a little bit of Gruber.
In House in the dark. In House in the dark.
What if...
Those German lessons I had when I was 10 are really paying off now.
Alan Rickman is very good in Die Hard, but imagine if it had been Werner Herzog.
Oh, wow.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
It'd be too intense. It'd be too terrifying.
It would certainly be. It would be interesting. He did play a villain in Jack Reacher, so there is precedent for this. So Justin and Laura had us on to talk about Public Enemies, a movie that we both love.
Yeah, and we sort of on separate tracks. We've loved this movie. It's come up once or twice. It's come up a few times over the years on the show or this and that and in conversations. And it was at that perfect kind of dovetailing, wasn't it? Because, we just loved it independently. And they happened to ask us about it. And it was perfect because it's obviously we're huge Michael Mann, diehards, lunatics. But this film in particular just is a Venn diagram of so many things that we love and that we're interested in. It was also kind of interesting timing for our next movie that we're about to do on the show, which is Last Man Standing, in the sense that it's like Prohibition, gangsters, Depression era. It's an interesting
crazy character
piece.
Actors playing small parts in a movie. Like there is real commonalities. I hadn't thought of that until you just said it. Yeah.
So the timing of it was immaculate. We did Public Enemies on the show is called Cows in the Field. It should be out, I believe, Friday, June 28th. So
yes.
it was a great conversation. Those guys were great. And even though Justin is, it's MIT, right? He's an MIT professor. He is a very intelligent guy, obviously. But the show is very accessible. It's very similar to what we do, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would say. So please check that out. And Liam's also been on another episode in the past discussing Starship
Troopers. Yeah, and I should say that like that show offers like an amazing assortment of episodes and guests. They did an episode about Dogville, Lars von Trier's masterpiece, which Lars von Trier will come up again later in this conversation. They did an episode about Tenet with the guy who wrote Christopher Nolan's biography, Nolan Variations, which is a great book. So the show has like a ton to offer. And like Justin and Laura will be on this show in the future discussing a little movie called
breakdown. So I actually thought while we're on that, it might be worth just talking about some of the movies that we have coming down the pipe well, like to get people, you know, so you guys can get ahead of it. Our next one we just mentioned is Last Man Standing. But heading down the river inexorably towards you is also Daylight with Sylvester Stallone, an interesting throwback disaster movie. It's basically Die Hard in a tunnel with a really interesting ensemble
of Sly,
cast.
I like to call it, because it's a Jesus
Liam has
movie,
a little theory about it that's pretty interesting. And then what else? We've got Star Trek First Contact.
Resistance is futile to the Borg Queen. That's going to be a good episode.
We've all got very disturbing crushes on.
Disturbing or right? You decide when you listen to the episode.
And our guest for that episode is Andy Majorano, who is a dear friend of mine and is a huge Trekkie. Star Trek First Contact is his favorite movie. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We've already had it. It was a great conversation because I know next to nothing about Star Trek and he knows absolutely everything about Star Trek. And we've kind of calibrated the episode to be hopefully great appeal and entertainment value no matter where you are on the Star Trek spectrum.
And I'm like closer to nothing, not knowing anything, but grew up watching Next Generation, so like have a bit of a built-in fandom. We also will say that Heim's Hive will rise again when we get to the Relic in a few months, and Con Air's coming up. We are nowhere near. You might think The Rock is the high point of 90s action cinema, but there's some big O's coming up that are really great. There's a lot
to come. Breakdown we just mentioned, and Turbulence is another one that's coming up that is actually chock full of Die Hard DNA. I was pleasantly surprised when because some of these films I look at and they all have to be taken to the lab, as you guys know. If you're longtime listeners, they have to go through the tests. I'm very scrupulous about it all.
You know how you get those warnings that you have to keep your your air conditioning at 78? It's because of the amount of energy that the Die Hard computer takes.
I'm sorry, it's
AI and the Die Hard computer are really screwing things up.
I have to do it, but Turbulence passed with flying colors. It was a really fun reviz for that one. And then there's a couple of other podcasts that we were on as well. We wanted to talk about.
Yeah, aren't you talking about Henchmen?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this in possibly the Rock episode. I think I mentioned it. I was lucky enough to be invited on a show that's called Force 5 with a guy called Jason Kleberg. The format of that show is that it's a series of different top 5 lists that are really just a kind of keyhole into a wider conversation about movies. That might like top 5 car chases or top 5 shootouts or whatever it might be. And the episode that I'm doing is top 5 henchmen. So that was such a fun conversation.
Yeah.
And what's cool about it as well is I didn't know, neither of us know what the other one is picking. And some of his picks were like mind-blowingly things that I couldn't believe I didn't think of myself. One in particular, I'm not going to say what it is, but if you're a fan of Die Hard, this tangential pick that he had like thrilled me. And there was another one that was just something I never would have thought about that also like we were very much of like mind in the stuff that we were interested in jamming about. So that was a super fun, light conversation and once again that podcast is called Force 5. I believe it's out on Monday when we'll
drop a link to all these shows in the notes and post this on Monday so we can share it with the world. Speaking of it sounds like you guys had like a really good light time. I had the exact opposite of that. I had a great time talking about a very dark film called Breaking the Waves, Lars von Trier's breakthrough film. I discussed it on a podcast called Hit Factory, hosted by Aaron and Carly. It was just Aaron this week, but it's a really great conversation where I reckon with my long-standing, complicated relationship with Lars von Trier, who I sort of described as my art cinema daddy, because he helped kickstart my interest in foreign cinema when I was like 21, 22. I went deep on Danish film cinema history. I know more about it than I thought I did, and this conversation covers that. It is a Patreon episode, so you can't hear the whole thing, but 12 or so minutes of it are available on their main feed. That's Hit Factory Pod, and if you want to hear more of it, Aaron is a incredible conversation partner, draws really great things out of people, and that's a really good show. And it has a commonality in that it's about 90s movies and by extension the politics of the 1990s. So there's a lot of meaty, substantive conversations on there, and it's a lot of fun. And so we'll put a link to that in the notes down below for you to check it out.
And I just want to give a shout out to a friend, a mutual friend of ours and a longtime listener of the show, Jim Panola, who through his An Invitation Productions banner just started a new show that's called Thematic Content. I will be appearing on that show down the way. The one I'm doing I believe it's not going to be out till August. I'm going deep on LA neo noir. I won't say what the movies are yet, but because I don't know if they're being announced. But our another one of our mutual friends, Dom Nero, just was on the first episode of that, talking about Blade Runner in time for its anniversary.
40 years old?
I think it's 42.
42. Jesus.
I think it's 42 years
Same
old.
year as my birth. That movie.
So shout out to that show, Thematic Content.
And I think I'm going to be on it too, talking about
the killing of a Chinese bookie.
I was going to have you not say it, so people would have to watch the video. The Paris Number. A movie.
Does it say P-A-R? I can't understand, Sonny.
I love that this has happened to you because of me.
You absolutely sucked me into this the amazing world of Cosmo Vitelli, and I love living there. It's one of my favorite characters ever.
And Ben Gazzara, in my opinion, is one of the greatest actors of the 20th century. I'm obsessed with Ben Gazzara, so I'm excited when we get there. Jim, reach back out.
Amazing. I love this.
So look, we've built this we're very lucky. There's this great community of people that want us. But look, yeah, we've got all this stuff coming up, and we're thinking, this episode is obviously a little bit of an experiment. We're throwing ideas out here. We're reading some mail that we got. Should I read Should I read this email? We got a lovely email after our The Rock episode, which I got to tell you guys is one of our most popular episodes ever. People are loving it. Please share it with your friends. Bilge is the greatest guy who's ever lived and a great guest. And we're so lucky that he came on and offered so much of his time. But we got this email from a guy named Brandon who said, "Great episode this week. Bilge is a great guest. I've missed a few episodes recently because I haven't seen everything you covered. I grew up in a very small town in the far reaches of Western Texas. We didn't have a movie theater, but they used to show movies in the high school auditorium. But that got shut down because the theater manager got caught skinning a deer in the concession stand, and they just shut down the completely unprofitable movie program altogether. So already limited supplies of new movies got cut off completely, and I never got around to Broken Arrow. But I have seen The Rock many times. Really loved you guys digging through a classic. Keep up the good work."
The killing of a sacred deer. Oh my gosh, this is taking a dark turn.
P.S. The manager was also a teacher at the high school. Despite getting shit canned from the theater job, he managed to keep his job as a teacher.
Well, I don't know what to do with that, but it's very specific and vivid.
It's very specific, but I love that. We
appreciate the positive feedback.
I appreciate, but also
the disturbing imagery.
It's also just great that these movies bring these stories back to people, and it makes them think about the weird. And we don't traffic in nostalgia that much, but
I do.
It's nice. Well, sure, yeah, you do. I guess I do. I mean, I'm wearing a Killing of a Chinese Bookie t-shirt, so I don't know, but I do think it's nice that we're bringing people back to funnier, unusual stories in their lives, and we appreciate the reach out.
Thank you, Brandon, for that.
Thank you, Brandon.
Feedback, and we want to hear more from you. That's sort of what we were going with. That is, we're thinking about a couple of hopefully potential kind of expansion of the show. We're toying with it. It's going to depend on a few different factors, and of course, doing a podcast like this is an awful lot of work, but it's a labor of love for us. But we are thinking of doing potentially our
some kind of paid
Patreon
or
subscription type model. Maybe we might be able to go to weekly instead of bi-weekly. We may need your help on that in order to accommodate that. So what we wanted to ask you guys, we want to hear from you about what are you interested in terms of, if there was a subscription feed, what would you like? For example, would you be interested in looking at films that preceded Die Hard? That might be films like Ocean's 11 or Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 and Towering Inferno and The Detective, or are you not interested in that? Are you interested in more other
B-sides.
80s stuff that was relevant? Lethal Weapon, or the Joel Silver movies, First Blood, things like that. Are you interested in that, or are you exclusively interested in post Die Hard stuff? Maybe there's a lot of 90s films that we've talked about that we didn't quite pass the test, but were very, very close, such as Walter Hill's Trespass or Judgment Night, which is a hugely popular movie. Airheads, Die Hard in a Radio Station, things like that. And then there's tons of other, for example, Enemy of the State, like a movie that we would love to do, not necessarily a Die Hard corollary, but very much
but a Tony Scott
adjacent.
movie, and this is a Tony
Or
Scott
U.S.
podcast.
Marshals, things like that as well, that are not necessarily
Well,
like
let's not go
spin-offs,
crazy with the things we're going to cover on the
I really want to do that movie, but we want to hear from you. So, Liam, can you
Right.
tell people what what's the email again that they need to write?
The email for the show is diehardoab@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. We're also going to formalize this in the coming weeks or month, where we'll create a Google survey and we'll drop it at the top of every. We'll drop it at the top of every of the episode, so you can click and give us some feedback, and we're going to figure out from there. But look, at the end of the day, thanks so much for the support. Thank you for listening to these shows. Please listen to us on other shows. Tweet about the show. Tell people about the show. Tell your dad about the show. Tell your action-loving movie fans about the show.
Tell that teacher that killed that deer about the show. Like, make sure
if
that
he's still working there.
or maybe he didn't kill it; he just skinned it. So who knows what the?
Well, I think
what,
if he's skinning it, he's killing it, or it has been killed. I don't think it's
I don't know
doing
what the
great.
vibe is in Texas around that kind of thing, but and
Well, we'll have to see. Let's go on a trip. Let's go make a doc series about this. It's Die Hard. I don't know. We got to wrap this up. This is good enough.
Our team of producers, a la Talk Radio, are signaling for us to cut the That's one
thing.
for the Bogosian heads.
Thank you.
Eric
Oh my
Bogosian
goodness!
forever.
Like literally
Right.
a train going off the rails.
We need to shut this down. Thank you so much for thanks so much for continuing to support the show, for the positive feedback. Please write to us at diehardoab@gmail.com. Engage with us. Tell us what you're thinking. Tell us what you'd love to hear, what movies you'd like us to do, what kind of bonus content you'd be interested in. And we will be back next time with Bruce Willis in Purgatory.
Hey!
With 2 guns.
Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.